Today on Leadr Podcast, episode 26, we are joined by my guest, Mohamed Abou-Alam. He's a CEO of Precision Cardiovascular. He's an engineer turned investor turned executive, now tackling heart failure with remote monitoring. Let's get into the episode. Welcome to Leadr Podcast. This is episode 26, and I am pleased to invite my guest speaker today, Mohamed, and I'm going to butcher his last name, Abou-Alam.
That's right.
And anyway, welcome to Leadr Podcast. Did I get it correct?
Yes, you did. Thank you. Thank you for having
me. Okay. And he doesn't know I'm saying this, but he's coming from Egypt right now. So this is the first of a recording, and we may have some technical difficulties, but we are doing this today. And again, thank you for joining us today on Leadr Podcast.
Glad and looking forward.
So Mohamed and I met in Malta, which is this small little island in the middle of the Mediterranean at Medtech. Is it called Medtech World?
It is.
Is that what it was?
It is. Medtech World.
I mean, really, the rest is history. I met him, and then I introduced him to my colleague and friend and also client, Rhonda, who's also in the cardiovascular space. And we've just kept in contact ever since. And He's got a great company. I can't wait to talk about it. But before we do that, can you please tell our audience, what's your background, what's your leadership journey, origin story to bringing us to present date?
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me, Steph. And I come from outside of healthcare originally. I trained in engineering and worked in electronics and studios in electronics for a number of years in the UK. Then after a stint at business school, joined Samsung's headquarters in Korea. So that was quite an eye-opener for me, one of the big landmarks in really what I've done. I spent a total of 6 years in Korea and elsewhere with Samsung across various divisions. It was interesting not just because of Samsung, but because of what was going on with smartphones at the time and a lot of changes, obviously. And then after that, I got into investment. A couple of partners, one from Samsung and one outside, helped me setting up a fund in Benelux, investing in Belgium and the Netherlands. And that was later rolled into a larger fund in Italy. So I had a stint in VC. And then ultimately, one of my investments, a private investment of mine, was this company that we're going to talk about, Precision Cardiovascular, which I seeded with 3 others in 4 years ago, became the chairperson, and then became more and more engrossed and enamored with the mission, and ultimately decided to roll up sleeves and take over altogether and become an operator. So I've been the CEO of PCV, as we like to call it, for the last 2.5 years now.
I remember when I met you and you were telling me about your background, how intrigued I was, because every single client of mine, they're all obviously medical manufacturers doing the same thing, early and growth stage startups. But the fact that you have a background in investing and you know the nature of the beast and what ultimately people care about because you were one of them makes you a unicorn. And it is quite nice. I always say if a CEO has a marketing background, it also makes him a unicorn because it's, you're ambidextrous. You have multiple facets to bring to the table, not just from a medical manufacturing standpoint, but you also understand the whole game of fundraising and growing a company and what matters first to invest your time and money in and how to pitch your company and everything in between. So it's almost like you get a shortcut in the line, right?
Sometimes can be true. I think it's a difficult journey, to say the least. But I like to think that when you're an investor and then get involved in a singular mission, as I am now, you realize how important it is, in my opinion, to serve the employees of the company. As important as a CEO may be, I believe that over time, a CEO should become less important. That's one of the marks of a successful company. And I learned that through investing. And I'm trying to reinforce that in what we're doing here. Trying to make essentially our team, our small team but growing team, love the company more, love the mission more, and enable them better. Because ultimately, I think in a time and resource constrained environment, that's the best thing you can do.
Yeah. And especially with your crazy travel schedule, you can't be the most important person in the room.
Absolutely not.
First of all, I just wrote that down. I love quotes. It's like a hobby of mine. I love professional quotes, and CEOs being less involved, I think, is so important because even from my perspective in my own company, I'm trying to make myself less important. I don't even call myself a CEO, but I try to remove myself from the day to day so that I can be the visionary of the company and the strategic counterpart that's really way down the road and waiting for everyone to get there. Right. And if you're still in the car way back in, 4 lanes back, you're also not driving strategy. You're not driving the vision of the company. And so it is really important to enable and empower great people. It starts with hiring great people, but then empowering them to do what you would do when you're not there. And I love that. It's also speaks to your personality. Obviously, I only have met you a couple times at conferences. We seem to run into each other at conferences, Malta and LSI, I think.
Yeah.
Your personality is very humble, which is interesting because of your finance background. I wouldn't peg that culture as humble background. That was just a huge slam unintentionally, but you're a very humble person and disarming. And I like to use the phrase "never met a stranger." You definitely seem like that type of person. So again, also huge asset as a CEO because as a people leader, that's all that matters, is that people want to follow you and they believe in what you say and say what you do. So anyway, thank you again for joining us. Let's talk about we just discussed your origin story, but let's now talk about precision cardiovascular. And I'm a big fan of solving big problems. I think I was raised that way in the last half of my career at Intuitive. They always talked about solving big problems. If it's not big, why are we talking? And so let's start with the problem to solve here. And then I also want to understand how precision cardiovascular shows up in that space and how you intend to do it differently.
Sure. Well, Precision Cardiovascular, we are involved in a chronic disease that affects many, many patients. It's heart failure. It's the end stage of all cardiovascular disease. So, whether you've got high cholesterol, diabetes, respiratory problems, hypertension, in the end, much like an aging car that really can't function beyond a certain point, heart failure is the situation when the heart can either not pump properly nor or not relax properly. Um,
Mhm.
so it affects over 70 million patients worldwide. In the US alone, there's over 7 million affected by it. It has no real cure. But our particular space is not inside the hospital, but after you've been hospitalized as a patient, how can you be monitored and managed from afar so that any untoward or difficult episodes that you're due to suffer are warned of in advance and corrective action is taken by the nurses and clinicians. So, remote patient monitoring, essentially, but specific to heart failure. And
Mhm.
we're a device for patients that are already at risk and diagnosed or indicated to be likely to be hospitalized. So that's the indication
Mhm.
that exists for this device. There's already a couple of commercial stage companies doing this, commercial in the US at present. We're based in the UK, in England, and we're at a late preclinical stage. We're about 15 months away from our first human trials, which will be in the US and the UK. Yeah, we're very excited about what's coming next.
That's incredible. I know we've had multiple conversations around this world of CHF. I'm all too familiar, as is my colleague Rhonda. And I know we've had multiple conversations with you about that. I spent half my career driving disruptive robotic surgery technology, and the other half preventing and helping patients in the CHF community. So literally understand your lane very well. And I also have personal family that have suffered from CHF. And so it is something to solve for. I can just say that both not only working in the belly of the beast, but also seeing the effects of patients that it has on them. And the remote aspect of it is huge because back when I was working in this space, they called CHF patients repeat offenders. I'm sure you're familiar with that. And they're just constantly cycling in and out of the ICU because they're on all kinds of medications. And if not properly titrated, it can affect their hemodynamics. And that throws everything off, not only blood pressure, but stroke volume, cardiac output, systemic vasoresistance, all the parameters that ultimately all have to be in balance for the patient to be doing well. And so remote monitoring is huge. Tell me how you guys are doing that. Through what vessel are you monitoring them?
Sure, sure. So we're in the pulmonary artery connecting the heart to the lungs. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a sensor that is implanted there, and it reads the flow of blood, and the pressure within that vessel is seen as largely a one-to-one surrogate of left ventricular filling pressures. And filling pressures are the earliest marker of decompensation in the heart muscle, and circulatory flow. So that gives about a 14-day advance window of notification to the clinicians of an acute episode that the patient is due to suffer from. We're reading that particular sensor, which doesn't have any battery, from outside of the body. In our case, we have a wearable interrogating patch that is a small profile and fits on the patient's chest. So this is novel for this category. Previously, everything that's been used has been home-based, so needing the patient at home, plugged into a wall, mains
Like a
electricity.
telemetry unit. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, lying on his or her back on a
Mm-hmm.
fairly uncomfortable, oversized pillow, or seated at
Mm-hmm.
essentially a hub. So it really requires some very deliberate interaction on the patient's part. And from what we're seeing and hearing from actual users, whether patients, caregivers, or the clinicians, this is far too obtrusive and invasive of the day-to-day routines of these patients. And so everything needs to be more passive, less burdensome. Remember that these patients are already taking 4, 5, 6 pills a day. So when you
Yep.
ask them to also remember, maybe before breakfast at 11 o'clock every day, to be on this pillow, reading, getting their readings, chances are you won't get very good engagement. And indeed, there's a lack of adoption. That's one of the biggest hallmarks of this category, despite 10 years of commercialization attempts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's surgically implanted,
It is.
right? And then how often does it need to be changed out, or do you even know that yet?
Not at all. So it's a lifelong implant. I would add that it's carried out in a cath lab. It's quite a simple implantation. The patient is very lightly sedated. Takes about 15 minutes of the interventionist
Oh,
work.
wow.
And so, with a period of observation, you can be in and out in as little as 6 hours, depending on the condition. Lifelong implant, no need to recalibrate at all in our case. So that's it. It's a one-time implant.
That is huge. And I would assume it's similar to a pacemaker. They come in for some kind of reading to just make sure it's all functioning correctly. What, once a quarter, once a year?
Yeah, so certainly it's meant to reduce clinic visits. So if
Hmm.
you were visiting maybe every 6 weeks or so, we would aim for that to be reduced, and we see that reduced with predecessor devices down to maybe once every 6 months or even 12 months. And the rest is measurements taken at home, or in our case, also when you're out and about, because we're not limited to the home, so you can be ambulatory, going outside, going upstairs, on all fours gardening, engaging in daily activities, and everything's being captured in the background.
That's insane. I mean, wow, what a game changer. I can just tell you from, like I said, both professional and personal experience. My sister had heart failure. She was a juvenile diabetic, and because of mismanagement over, multiple years of really not coming to terms with having diabetes, She had hyperglycemia, which then led to, and often does lead to, congestive heart failure and also kidney issues. So she ultimately had a heart attack in the middle of dialysis. But the heart failure management was kind of her last part of her life and was pretty invasive and just continued to decline. And so anything that you can do from a preventative measure, I know, like you mentioned earlier, there's no cure. Once your muscle gets enlarged, you can't really go backwards, or at least not current day. But
Yes.
managing that disease, which is usually a comorbidity, right? Isn't
Yes.
it common to be comorbidity?
Well, heart failure has many comorbidities with it, or is, in the case of one type, HFpEF, is often a comorbidity itself of other chronic illnesses that the patient has.
Right. So the point is, it's a complicated patient
Yes.
and they aren't having an amazing life at that point, right? It can be really debilitating. So anything that can ease the patient's experience and make it better and potentially preventable of a major event is huge. So if there's an investment community listening, listen up. This is huge. Spoken from one investor to another.
I
No, I
just
mean, all kidding
really,
aside.
yeah, well, this is part of our story. So our medical director is Professor Sir Magdi Yacoub. He's now in his well, he's turning 90 next month. He is world renowned for his cardiac transplant surgery work from the 60s onwards in the US and in the UK. But really, his discovery was that heart failure patients were coming into the operating theater very late. He wasn't the only one to note that, of course, but his research instinct was that there has to be a technology that can monitor remotely and continuously almost, so that we can capture the baseline of each patient on a personalized basis. And that single source of truth, if you like, that is individual to each patient. And this is way before data analytics, big data, AI. This is going back 20 years plus. But that thinking was ahead of its time, because indeed today, if you can capture the baseline for each patient individually, not only are you able to avert hospitalizations through corrective actions, but also you can engage the patient with their own data. It's almost like wellness on an acute level for these poor patients who are very sick, letting them know how
Yeah.
diet is affecting their condition, how their outings and daily activities and exertion, all of these, it's very important to engage the patients. And indeed, this is what we're hearing, that they both wanted to be discreet, but also want to understand how their data is developing. They don't want to feel that they're reliant on their family members or maybe a caregiver or even a nurse, a community nurse. So that sense of agency is hugely important.
Yeah. And so I know you said you're a couple years out, or I think it was 18 months from commercialization, or first in human, I think is what you
First,
said.
15 months
But
out. Yeah.
yeah. But early results, if you've had those, I'm assuming during the prototyping phase, have been really favorable. And you had mentioned it gives about a green light on the left ventricular function about 2 weeks in advance of a major event, correct?
Yes, that's right. So we're currently in animal models, and one of the features of our device is the ability to monitor while you're active. So in our case, it's currently pigs, and they're walking about, and we're able to read both their pressures and their level of activity. So if they're going up an
Mm.
incline versus if they're lying down feeding, and so when you're able to connect activity to pressure, you get much more context to interpret that pressure that you're receiving. And if you think about it, then you can separate spikes or changes in pressure that happen because of an activity, which often is the case, exertion, from those that are happening naturally as, part of the aging process or what happens during heart failure over time. So context is hugely important over and above that sort of baseline single source of truth for the
Mhm.
ability on a data level for nurses and doctors to interpret what's going on with their patients.
Incredible. I'm so excited about seeing this evolve, and I am excited about your First in Human coming up in a couple years, hopefully sooner than later, and getting this out mainstream, because I do see, like I said, there's such a patient value proposition here. And if you're doing it differently and in a way that's amenable to the patient, I think that's everything. And then between now and then, think about how much is going to evolve with AI, and
Yes.
it can only make the whole platform better. So I'm thrilled to have you on today, because I, really want to highlight innovation. And I'm a big fan of highlighting innovation, not just for, different mousetraps out in the market, but things that are actually solving big problems, and also with a patient first perspective. And this clearly has a huge patient proposition. So I applaud you all for doing what you're doing and continuing to forge ahead. Well,
Thank you.
let's change lanes a little bit. Let's just talk about the industry in general, but also, you as a med tech leader and a medical manufacturer. I like to ask people this, but sometimes it can come off-putting. What keeps you up at night? But I think it's also just, what pain points are you experiencing right now within this, medical manufacturing position as a CEO?
Great question. So I think top of the list is that we're small, and every startup in medtech has to start small. Amazingly, I think we'll always be small against our mission. So we're never going to be able to scale our organization to be able to do all the things we want to do. Time and money won't allow for that. So partnerships are crucial. And what strikes me in medtech is when you're doing something that's quite multidisciplinary, you really need to have the best partners that suit what you're doing. So partner selection is one of those challenges, incredibly rewarding when you get it right, but equally a pitfall if you're not giving it the attention that it deserves. Often that's hard because you think, I've been an investor, so I understand, the perpetual cycle of fundraising and the execution that needs to follow. And you're in between the two of those. But actually, partnerships are really one of the biggest enablers for success in medtech because you're so
Mm-hmm.
small and will always be small. So that's one of the things that keeps me up at night. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Just making sure you're getting it right. The people that you're getting into strategic partnerships with, that they're going to deliver on the agreement.
Deliver and that they share an understanding of where the company is aiming to get to.
Mhm.
And so it has to be, I believe, even though it is a transactional element, of course, these are partners, there has to be a common goal. And
Shared
often,
vision.
yeah, shared vision. And I think that's one of the ways that astute investors as well will do their own diligence on companies. They'll ask their partners, what do you believe, how are you serving this company, etc. And the bigger the partner, the more important, but that's one of the ways to check. Just like when you're interviewing, asking multiple people the same question, it's the same thing here. Ask the partners the same question. Are they all singing from the same hymn sheet? That gives a good indication of stability beyond
Mm,
what the immediate numbers and reporting tells you. So it's important.
right.
And I think the other thing that keeps me up at night is culture. So
Mhm.
leading with purpose is important, but setting the tone and setting the culture is equally so, because the way the company paces itself, the way the company reacts and plans, um, this is all informed by the culture that you instill. And resilience and grit and determination, yes, are personal characteristics, but you won't see them company wide unless you're really fostering that in a culture. Or whatever else in terms of qualities you believe are important. But culture starts from day one. You're never too small to have a culture, is my thinking. And that is a continuous, verb, as you often like to say. You have to keep it going.
Yeah. Yeah. Two people have referenced my verb article this week. So yay to LinkedIn. um, well, I completely agree with you on culture. So I've worked for startups, but I've also worked for massive titans within this industry. And I've had the fortunate circumstance of working in great cultures. I've also been in a couple crappy cultures, which, it's a rite of passage. Everyone's done it. But I actually think that speaks so much to leadership, because leadership drives culture. And anytime you're interacting with a company that maybe has a not so great culture or even dysfunctional culture, I always go back to leadership. It is 100% tied directly to leadership because things roll downhill, right? And so if at the top you're setting a tone that of expectation that may or may not be equitable for others, that is rolling down multiple lanes, right? And so I think anytime you're looking at a high attrition rate or a lot of dysfunction amongst the ranks, it's always tied back to culture, and that is always tied back to leadership or lack thereof.
Yeah.
So I think you're right to have that be a priority outside of, the obvious transactional strategic partnerships and fundraising and all the things that keep you afloat. But if you don't have people all marching to the same vision and mission, and they're not really bought into it, which is part of culture, is giving people purpose, then you're all going in different directions. People feel disconnected. They don't feel tied to anything bigger than themselves. And it really is a dysfunctional mess. And so
Yes.
I think culture is everything. I'll say it again. Culture is everything. And culture is directly tied to leadership. So 100% agree with you on both perspectives. You had also talked about, working with remote teams. And I think
Yeah.
that ties with your culture, but tell me about that.
Yes. So obviously today, working with remote teams is natural. I think COVID accelerated that, of course, as we know.
Mhm.
It's also very prevalent in medtech because of the partnerships that you need, and the complexity of many of these products. But I also want to tie it to culture because people are different, and
Mhm.
people come from different cultures as well. And undoubtedly, if you're working with the best, and hopefully you are, you will find that the best come from different cultures. So, how do
Yep.
you enable people to work well in a remote setup? I
Mhm.
almost think that's now a higher level challenge because you have these different backgrounds, and some people,
Mhm.
for example, can be low context, very much focused on words written and spoken. Others can come
Mhm.
from a background that is the opposite, high context, relying on actually what is not said, and body cues and language, which often are better transmitted in person than they are remotely. So,
Mhm.
acknowledging that and understanding about oneself and about others, I think, is crucial when you start working in such a distributed fashion with others in different time zones and on video screens and so forth. Not everyone will react the way that you think to discussions you've had, or will respond the way that you expect, and that is totally normal. Acknowledging and accepting that, and developing from that point onwards, is, I think, crucial to success in a remote setup. And I've been humbled. I thought I had, and I have had, a mix of experiences in different parts of the world, working with many different nationalities, big teams and small. But in
Mhm.
this particular very distributed setup where everyone is so hands on, it's reinforced that I'm still on a learning curve as to how to best enable everyone who comes from a different background.
Yeah.
So that's really important.
I have two things to say about that because I completely agree with you. Well, one, I think the universal language amongst all cultures and all people's backgrounds and different setups for maybe culture that they came from is EQ. If
Yeah,
everyone can have that universal thread, independent of what language you speak or what culture or faith system you have, whatever, the universal language is emotional intelligence. And I think that was kind of an aha moment for me when I stepped out of corporate and got into a much more blended environment. I mean, I have clients all over the globe, and I've just really learned that if everyone can maintain a level of emotional intelligence, it has a lot to do with self awareness, but it also has to do with reading the room, right? And just understanding what other people need to make that relationship positive. I think that's a really good place to start, is if everyone's checking their own emotional intelligence gauge, that is a big deal, right?
yeah,
And can definitely help. I actually am a big fan of the book Emotional Intelligence. I had Travis Bradberry, who's one of the authors,
Yep.
on my podcast, but he's also written 2 books on it, Emotional Intelligence 1 and 2.0. So I would recommend, if anyone's listening and they haven't already watched the Travis Bradberry episode, to definitely read the book. But second to that, it's more universal just in what's going on in the world, is we need to get back to embracing differences, right?
Yes.
Because there's so much contention if people don't agree with you. And that can be in work, that can be in personal lives, that can be in anything. And
True.
it's okay. I think it's what makes humanity is it's okay for everyone to have different origin stories. They can have different opinions, different faith systems, whatever. We need to really embrace, even in a corporate environment or a working environment, everyone has their own story and everyone has a story, right? Not to get super philosophical here, but I I'm old school. I think you are too. I was raised to just completely coexist with people who I didn't agree with. And
Yeah,
and that's normal. Normal. It's
absolutely.
normal. Everybody. So let's go back towards that, right?
Yeah, yeah. Indeed, somehow these things tend to be forgotten maybe over time, but the
I
reality is
agree.
you don't go out choosing who you work with and who you associate with in business. That's not the case. So
Yeah.
it's yeah, a bit of back to basics and humility is always useful, I think.
Humility is huge. I agree with you. Well, listen, I know it's really late in Egypt right now, so
That's
I'm going
okay.
to ask you the I know, I really do appreciate you taking the time. I am going to ask you the final 3 questions I ask every guest speaker, and I want to give it its due time. So, in no particular order, you can answer them however you see fit. It's kind of what I call the speed round of guest speakers on Leadr. One, a mentor that made an impact in your life and why, and someone that you might want to pay it forward to. A book, same thing, made an impact on you and why. And then lastly, a superpower that you have that you'd like to share.
Sure. So there is a mentor that I had at Samsung. He was my manager at the time when uh, I was just moving from Korea to Europe with the company. His name is Giuseppe Donagemma, Italian, Beppe for short. Um,
Full name.
yeah, Beppe. What made him a mentor for me was, believe it or not, something that we haven't touched on, and maybe it doesn't matter to others, but it's his energy. Somehow I feel
Mm,
that energy is contagious, and
absolutely.
leadership is many things, but I think his energy was really, I can't tell you how much it just filtered into the whole team. And it made not just myself, but I could see everyone really want to get up and work and even in adverse times. And so energy is important. And I don't know if it's the easiest thing to pick up from others, from a mentor. I don't know if he's managed to transmit that through to me, but I realize how much of an impact it had on me. So my advice, if anyone's listening, is if you feel someone around you has energy that is contagious that you enjoy, then that's probably a good thing. And probably there's a lot of good things that can come with that if you work closely together. Books. I thought about this earlier because you did tell me you would ask about this. And actually, it's a childhood book. It's a classic, Watership Down. It's I don't know why it's a
Love it.
children's book, but but I like it because it's got this resilience theme within it, which when I first read the book, I was new to what grit is and what being punched and coming back means. So I learned a lot from that, and I feel that it's a book that is enjoyable. I've read it many times. It's enjoyable, but it's also meaningful on multiple levels. It's a book that I've gone back to many times over the years, so it's one of my favorites. Superpowers. I don't know. That's the trickiest question. Sometimes I'm complimented on a point of resolving things with humor occasionally. So I like to think that sometimes not everything is as serious as it needs to be, or we don't need to take things that
Completely
serious.
agree. Yes.
So, as serious as we need to be at times, and as solemn as we sometimes look when we're reading emails, in actual fact, maybe humor is often the lever that makes things work out. And I like to think that occasionally it comes in handy, and that's perhaps the only thing that I'd say to that effect of it. I'm not sure it's a superpower, but it certainly helped on more than one instance.
Completely agree, one, with your perspective on that. But I also think the root of humor is perspective, right? If you're able to laugh at yourself in,
Yeah,
situations, I wouldn't say laugh at others, but if you're able to laugh at the situation or yourself that's self-deprecating, it also shows that you have perspective on we're all not that important, right?
yeah,
There are bigger things that are much more important. And the day to day nonsense is so insignificant in the grand scheme of things. And so I think when you can be lighthearted about it, it shows that you have perspective.
yeah. Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
And perspective is really valuable. When you think back, nothing really seems as important or as serious as perhaps it did at the time. If you're able to reflect that way in the moment and be jolly and jovial about it, often that helps you out and can make others happy as well.
I would say, I don't know your mentor, but I would say the earlier conversation around, energy, I do think they made a difference of you and on you because you have that same contagious energy. I mean, think about how many people were in the room at Malta. And both Rhonda and I were just compelled to have a conversation with you because you have that contagious energy. I believe that what you put out, you get back. And I think we're all positives and negatives. We're all just made up of ions, right? So if you are putting out positive energy, you're going to get that back. And I
Yes,
definitely think that is kind of intertwined with your superpower is you do have a very positive energy. I'm sure you're dealing with a lot of difficult conversations at times as a medical manufacturer, but I do think you have one perspective, you're calling it humor, and also just a positive energy about you, which will absolutely serve you as a CEO and a people leader. We've done a lot of conversations in the last, let's call it 3 or 4 episodes. They've all kind of centered around this, that there are technical founders, people that can build a prototype but don't have commercialization skills. They don't have that people lead skills, the visionary. And it's always great when you find someone that lands right in the middle, right? That they have the technical prowess, but they also have the people leading skills. And that is like the unicorn of CEOs that can do it all. And they don't need to just hand it off to someone else that's a little bit more, corporate or seasoned in the people leadership. So I would say that because of your superpower, and that enabling energy, you're going to take this to the long haul. And I'm thrilled to see where this goes.
thank you, Steph. Fingers crossed, we'll keep
Of
going
course.
and get it through.
Right?
Yes,
Well, call on all your old friends in the investment world and they can help.
that's stop.
I
Yes,
mean, CHFers need it.
yes.
CHF patients need it. And, we're counting on you guys to get it over the line and hopefully the trials go well and everything is swimmingly successful. So again, thank you for taking time out of your late evening and travels to be a part of Leadr Podcast. It's always good to see you and talk to you. I'm sure I'll see you at the next meeting, but until then, thank you so much, Mohamed. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Steph.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Leadr Podcast. If you enjoyed our conversation, please take a moment to subscribe, share, and leave a comment so more listeners can find us. Interested in sharing your own story on Leadr Podcast or looking to elevate your brand and marketing efforts with Tribe Agency? Visit us at tribeagency.org/contact to get in touch. We value your engagement and look forward to growing with you. Don't forget to follow Leadr Podcast for more inspiring episodes like this. Thanks again and see you next time.